Alan Myers here. I am. This is another episode of For the Republic. Glad you're all here. Thank you for joining us. With me today is, excuse me, the one, the only war hamster, Brady. Brady, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. This last hour has been pretty darn hilarious and chaotic. The reason I'm on here tonight, 2 weeks in a row, is because our good friend Douglas V. Gibbs is speaking in Lake Havasu. He was supposed to go on stage about an hour ago, and I was watching it with some of his regular followers. And they're really late, and some gal who's up there ahead of him was giving, let's just be kind and say it was not a compelling presentation. We got a pretty good idea of where she was trying to get to, and it had something to do with sovereign citizenship. And I cannot imagine the pain Doug is going through to have to follow that act if the audience is even awake at this point. But I didn't get a chance to watch Doug. I'll have to watch it on the replay on the Untold History channel tomorrow. And then Al and I, because we're so technologically savvy, both struggled to get here on time for getting passwords and links.
But the important thing is we got here.
We did.
No, you're much more techie than I am.
Jeez.
All right. Doug is going to follow sovereign citizen. Interesting. Okay.
Look, I think that's where she was going, but I mean, it's probably a very nice lady and a patriot, but for the love of God, I would have vetted my speakers, and that was not someone I would have going right before Doug.
Well, thank you. Okay, so we got some whack news, and I know you have some things. This one is short. We'll get into it. It's wacky, it's crazy, and at the same time, it is very sad. Oh, I'm going to acknowledge that up front. There's nothing funny about it, and I feel bad about it, but it just shows how wacky some people can get. This happened this year. A mom in New Hampshire killed her family, apparently because she has a shopping addiction. She was accused of embezzling over $600,000 from her employer, and she had done that before. She even acknowledged that she was a shopping addict, and she also said, apparently on one of her posts, being on a budget should be a crime against humanity. Had you heard anything about this?
Well, you said it's in New Hampshire?
NH Mom. So I'm going to go with yeah.
Did it say what town?
I didn't see a town. This happened, I believe, back in August.
Well, I have not heard about this one, so continue.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. It's just that this shows that when somebody has, and I'm not laughing about it, it's just straight up, somebody has a mental health problem, they're gonna unfortunately do some really, really crazy things. And whatever she used to kill her family is not at fault. So, very sad news. Very sad news.
Apparently, she also has a budget problem. But
apparently, I guess she would need a class in what are really crimes against humanity and what aren't. And if you have that big of a problem in that you have to shop constantly, you need help. Serious help. Have you heard about TikTok?
I have.
And that apparently it's going to become a U.S. company. Did you hear about that?
Oh, I did. Are you going to talk about who is going to be running it?
Well, I want to know, tell me what you know.
Well, Larry Ellison, the founder and CEO of Oracle, apparently is going to be running point on this. And Trump's love affair with Silicon Valley and people who are big fans of things called transhumanism seem to be getting a lot of really good deals from the Trump administration, and people are asking questions. This goes back to the Peter Thiel connections, but it is, I mean, look, I'd rather have Larry Ellison, as insidious as he has been throughout the years with his, shall we say, surveillance state technology, I'd rather have him running TikTok than China.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just one step further to technocracy, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not crazy about this at all.
I'm trying to wrap my, because in this article it talks about an executive order. And executive orders are meant to go no further than the executive branch. So I'm trying to find what law, apparently a law went into effect in January of 2025, which is coming out of Congress, that says, you have to reduce ownership to foreign ownership below 20%, or you go out of business.
Yeah, the TikTok law was passed in good faith. Even got some Democrat support.
And well, I think people who've been on the channel a while know that I'm not a big fan of China. And when I say China, I'm not talking about the country. I'm not talking about the people. I'm not talking about the language. I'm not talking about the culture. I'm talking about only one thing: CCP. It's the worst. China is the biggest polluter, the most polluted country in the world. And that's according to a report out of WHO. And no, I'm not talking about that great British rock band in 2020. I don't know what's going to happen to the citizenry in the next 20, 30, 40 years, given how polluted and polluting that country is. But if China could spy on the US using TikTok, they would. So I'm okay with having it go away. What about you?
Well, I'm okay with it going away, but it's not going away. And we're still going to have the youth of America addicted to TikTok or Instagram and all the other different video platforms. My biggest question on this, although we assume the Trump administration means well when they're doing this, and it's a positive step, but where in the Constitution does the federal government have the authority to do what they did? And is the U.S. government taking an ownership stake? They're talking about getting dividends. So
thank you for bringing that up. Keep going.
Oh no, I mean that's been problematic from day one. That's
there. The document that was written by our founders. Now I got to put my glasses on. They put a lot of thought into this. And they knew fully well they could not predict the future. They were very good at that, which meant they created the opportunity to amend this document, the Constitution. And in fact, the Constitution went operational in March of 1779. And by September of 1789, there were 12 amendments already proposed. 10 of them came back ratified by 1791. They knew how to change this or add to it. And what I see going on, let's say for the last 100 plus years, is that the federal government just does what it wants to. Because the people who were supposed to make sure that the federal government does what it's supposed to do is not doing it. Now, what power was given, because all the powers given to the federal government, Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated powers. And this is what Section 8 says that might relate to this. And tell me what you think, Brady, okay? The only one that seems to apply here is to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. To regulate commerce with foreign nations. And we know they get to put taxes, duties, imposts, excise tax, whatever. But to your point, does regulate commerce with foreign nations include demanding that ownership in a foreign owned country get reduced? I'm going to say no.
It's funny, you go into these definitions of different types of government, and there's a lot of shades of gray with them. But when you have the federal government getting involved in a for-profit company, that's the road towards mercantilism or fascism. Now, we already live in a mercantilist system, whether we want to admit it or not. But this is kind of more, a little bit more, shall we say, an obvious next step. And this goes back. It's the same question I asked when we were bailing out the auto companies back in 2008 and 9 with Obama. The United States government had no authority to take an equity stake in these companies. They just don't. But that is not the government's business. The government's business is, if commerce is broken, step in and fix it, and then get the heck out of the way again. That's it.
Because again, learning from Doug and from you, the federal government was created by the states. There was no federal government until that Constitution was ratified. The states created the federal government to be very limited and to do exactly what they're being told to do and nothing more. It was to deal with the rest of the world as a unified voice for the states. War, peace, treaties, trade, all of that. Everything that dealt with the outside world. It had almost no or had no position inside the country. It could not tell a state what to do. And the only time the federal government was accepted, let's say looking in, is if two or more states were squabbling. Yet now, where doesn't the federal government exist in our lives? I would really like to have a Wayback Machine, and I would like to go back in time, pick up a few founders. You can imagine who I would pick up, bring them back, and say, how we doing? What do you think they're going to say?
Alan, if I had a DeLorean that could go back in time and go back to the exact same period of time, I would bring the founders back here. I'd show up there with modern day weaponry and take out the people who just destroyed this Constitution on, basically before the ink was dry. And where I'd start, who I'd start with. And I go,
oh, share with me.
Well, it starts with an A and ends with Alexander Hamilton. But no, it's funny. It's the way I was trying. Yeah, I was with my father-in-law yesterday for a couple hours because we had to take our wives to the airport. They had to fly back to Michigan for a funeral on short notice. And I got to, he's a former assistant attorney general from a nearby state. He's a successful lawyer. And he's really enjoyed talking to me about the Constitution because he was never taught it the way it's supposed to be. He's a lawyer. We know this story all too well. But I had a captive audience in my car for 2 hours, and we went through all this. Bottom line, what is the Constitution? The enumeration doctrine. Make the enumeration doctrine great again. Megda. Mega.
Mega. Yeah.
Basically, if you imagine all the Constitution, all the powers of a government, all the authorities is a piece of pie or a pizza. Under the Other Federation, the federal government had a very small slice. And that was it. Everything else was left to the states. With the Constitution, we realized we needed to give a little bit more of the pie to the federal government, and they did. But they enumerated those specific authorities they could. And the enumeration doctrine is very simple. If the Constitution doesn't say the federal government can do it, they cannot. And then they turned around with the 10th Amendment and reiterated that exact same thing. It was redundant, and it said the exact same thing. It said if the Constitution doesn't say the states can't do something, they can. And if you understand the Constitution with those two simple principles, none of this stuff happens. Unfortunately, we live in a world where people like Alexander Hamilton, who pushed for, and it's my favorite quote of all time, air quotes, federally funded internal improvements and protective tariffs. What that means is those closest to the seat of government get rewarded with those contracts for the federally funded internal improvements. It is known as mercantilism. It is known as crony capitalism. It is known as fascism, when the government and private industry work together hand in hand. In the 1800s, they called it the spoils system, and there was a huge debate of all the corruption. This even goes all as far as Ulysses Grant, where he had to create the first civil service reform in the 1870s because of all the corruption. Because the spoils system is to the victor go the spoils. It means if your political party wins, you get to hand out all the government goodies to your people who got you in power. That is not self-determination and government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That is pure crony capitalism. It is corrupt as all hell, and it's what our country has been living under. And the only thing keeping it from just going full on fascism is the Constitution still somewhat works. But yeah, it's been a problem for a very long time. And for all the wonderful things that Donald Trump has done as president, this is one I don't support.
I would thank you for all of that. Yes, after you began, I was going to go to the 10th Amendment, but you already talked about it. And what I really like about the 10th Amendment is it is relatively short, it's to the point, and it makes, and I'm going to read part of it, and it really makes something very clear, I believe, to the reader. And it begins with the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. That's telling you right there. United States being the federal government, not delegated. If we didn't grant them to you, if we didn't give them to you, you don't have it. Go home. And I take it one of your favorites is Alexander Hamilton. One of my favorites is John Marshall.
Yeah, he's on my Mount Rushmore.
He did so much damage. I think he was on the Supreme Court for 34 years. The guy had to live that long. Really? Another one who, of course, was very much a patriot in the beginning, but went rogue in the end was John Adams.
Well, let me correct that.
Okay.
He didn't go rogue at the end. He went rogue in the middle.
Well, I mean, at the end of his political career, he still lived after that.
He still had he was still very influential in politics after he lost the election of 1800. But
yeah,
for 4 years as president, he was part of the Federalist Party, and it was the Federalist Party that went rogue. Adams actually had more restraint than most of them. He was trying to keep a balance and keep us out of war. He doesn't make my Mount Rushmore of villains, even though it was under his presidency that the Federalist Party decided to go all fascist.
Yeah.
So I give Adams, and the great thing about Adams is, him and Jefferson started out as friends, became political enemies, didn't talk again until about 1807 or 8, because Abigail Adams kept writing letters to Jefferson. They would reconcile and become very good friends for the last 13, 14 years of their lives, and they died on the exact same day.
July 4th, 1826.
50th anniversary. Yeah.
Yes.
So the Adams story turns out good.
I like the way it ends. I like the fact that Jefferson and Adams reconciled. It's just for the 4 years he was in, especially the Alien Sedition Act, I'm not a big fan of.
Well, it's funny. We've had 3 periods of, I'll give you 3.5 periods of extreme censorship in American history.
Okay.
You have the Alien Sedition Act of 1798, which, for those who don't know, the Federalist Party was in power. Hamilton was really the power behind the Federalist Party. And there's a big internal debate going on in America whether we should side with the French or the English in the next war they were going to fight. We ended up not siding with either, thank goodness. But that's what that was all about. And Adams' party creates the Alien and Sedition Act, where they basically could jail you if you spoke against the federal government.
Was it just the federal government? I mean, was it the federal government, or was it specifically the president?
I think it's the federal government itself, or even Congress.
Okay.
Basically, you can't say stuff we don't like. We saw it again. No,
Okay, wait a minute. Hold on. I gotta pull this out. Go ahead. Say that again.
well, we saw that that's the same sense of government censorship. Again, that was during a period of almost war. Now, of
But
course,
you can't say what?
well, you can't say anything criticizing the government, basically.
Okay. Well, help me understand this because I'm slow. There's a thing called the First Amendment.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply when we determine it's an emergency. You didn't read that caveat, that asterisk?
And to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Unless the government doesn't want to be petitioned.
I didn't see that asterisk in my copy. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna have to get you an updated copy because
Uh,
that's been applied several times. So apparently, it's got to be there.
Which really, I mean, think about this. This is prior to 1800, and this is already happening. And one of the founders is involved in violating the First Amendment. I mean, part of it is that this is a classic example, and it still exists today, that getting people or getting the federal government to follow the contract, the compact that created it, is up to the people.
Unfortunately, the people only ability to enforce that is at the ballot box, the way the Constitution was written. And I suggest that may have to change if we ever get an Article 5 convention. I'll talk to you about that later. But
Okay.
I want to give the other examples of
Yeah.
censorship because it happened again in 1861 when Lincoln decided to declare war on the country to the south of him, known as the Confederate States of America. They absolutely censored and jailed anybody who opposed Lincoln. Uh,
Whoa.
the radical Republicans were really bad. And for those of you who think you still support Lincoln, I am going to do a show this Thursday talking about Lincoln's spies and Lincoln's counterfeiters and who his real backers were, the radical Republicans, and what they stood for. So if you ever want to see a really good Lincoln roast you haven't heard before, you're going to want to watch that show. We saw it again in World War II when they decided to do the Japanese internment camps, which was absolutely unconstitutional, and it's an absolute blemish on America's history. Patriotic Japanese Americans, just because of their bloodlines, got to be locked up. And then, of course, we saw it after the
But wait a minute. What happened to their land, their property?
That was confiscated.
Thank you.
Yeah. But the big one to me, and it was after January 6th, 2021, where basically the President of the United States got taken off the internet by social media companies. Tons of us, including many people watching right now, got censored off their social media. We locked people up. We had free, I mean, it was basically, they tried to create a department of censorship. This is full on tyranny. And it's happened about 4 times. Only this one, allegedly, there was no war going on in 2021, or was there? Is this a different type of war that they were waging against the American people? And it was. That's where the censorship came from. That's the reason governments censor you when they're afraid of what you might say, because they usually do that when they're in the wrong.
Because apparently they don't want to deal with your grievances.
No. And we can go on this topic for a long time.
An interesting side note to that, what happened to the Japanese people on the West Coast is there were, I believe, a lot of Germans on the East Coast. And weren't we at war with Germany at the time?
We were.
Did any of those people get put into an internment camp?
Not that I'm aware of.
And
it's an interesting question.
No, there was none.
Well,
it didn't happen.
It's funny you asked that question because my grandparents came here on my father's side, came here from Germany in 1938. And you'd think if they're going to lock up the Japanese on one coast, they'd be locking up my grandparents who were in Maryland.
Right. Didn't happen.
Nope.
So to me, it was, I believe it obviously happened after Pearl Harbor. And I don't know what it would be something to study. I don't know what the reasoning was behind it, but maybe you might have a problem if Japan had taken the Hawaiian Islands, but they didn't.
Well, that was never in play.
But
They didn't have the ability to extend force that far.
yeah,
The part about that that gets me is we know for a fact that the United States had broken Japanese codes prior to the Pearl Harbor attack, and we know FDR knew the attack was coming. There's a lot of Americans, including those who funded the Nazis in the first place, Wall Street, Prescott Bush, all their buddies, the Brown brothers, Harriman crew, um, didn't want war with Germany. It was not popular until, in fact, 3 days before, the Chicago Tribune family by the name of the McCormick family, very old school blue blood family. They're the ones who invented the International Harvester, the McCormick Reaper. It's how they made their money. Went to Chicago, bought the newspapers up. They wrote an article 3 days before criticizing all of them. I mean, really criticizing FDR's attempts to go into World War II. And 3 days later, Pearl Harbor happens. Everyone forgot about McCormick's article. But the fair criticism is that FDR let Pearl Harbor happen so the Americans' ire would get raised and we would want to go to war. Now, we never declared war on Germany.
they declared war on us.
We declared war on Japan. Germany was allied with Japan and was forced by treaty to declare war on us. And that's exactly what they wanted to have happen. Another fun bit of history is that FDR
Mm-hmm.
and Churchill didn't like each other. FDR talked a lot of smack about Churchill behind his back and vice versa. And they became allies, but they didn't like each other at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's, it just shows how much more individuals need to be involved in what's going on in the country, because the elected employees are not really doing their job. This one's wacky. Okay, I guess that's why it's in Wackadoodle News. I just saw this. It's something interesting to consider. And there was a crushed skull discovered in China in 1990. And through digital reconstruction and everything that would be involved, the people running this study are suggesting that this is what may have happened, and that this skull is 1,000,000 years old, and it came out of Asia, not Africa, and that there may be some uncertainties when it comes to what was considered to be the timeline of human evolution. Have you heard of this?
I think I just did. I think I read.
Okay.
I think I read that this morning.
And apparently, this skull, the name is in Chinese, and I can't pronounce it, so I'll just call it Y2. Might belong to what they call a human forerunner called Homo erectus. Now, some people, very prestigious places such as the Natural History Museum in London, thinks that, who is an anthropologist, said it suggests that by 1,000,000 years ago, our ancestors had already split into distinct groups, pointing to a much earlier and more complex human evolutionary split than previously believed. And the research team was a bit shocked. Now, somebody else is not quite sold on it. Some people find that the findings were provocative and was was very grounded in solid work. But another archaeologist from La Trobe University is not convinced. But it's something to be aware of.
It would change our understanding of human evolution if this is true. Now, when you say there's a scientist that doesn't necessarily support it, one thing you and I have learned, especially talking about climate, air quotes, science, is that scientists will quite often come with a, shall we say, discovery that benefits whatever their current funding mechanisms want. So if you're coming up with a new theory and it screws over someone else's funding, they're going to say the opposite. But something in chat just a second ago was very interesting. We have
Oh, good.
Groutman, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, says carbon dating is not accurate. Now, I am not a scientist, and I want to, if anybody knows the answer to this, please put it in chat. I read years ago that after we set off the nuclear bombs, the radiation caused carbon dating to no longer be a reliable measure that it once was before we set off nuclear weapons in the atmosphere. I don't know if that's true or not. So if anybody in the chat knows that answer, I would love to be educated on it. But when I saw Groutman say that,
Well, I just looked it up.
okay,
Now remember, this skull is allegedly 1 million years old, right?
sure.
Right. According to this quick one, carbon dating is a reliable method for dating organic material up to about 50,000 years old, but it has limitations and assumptions, making it not always perfectly accurate or precise. The method is subject to errors from contamination, fluctuating atmospheric carbon-14 levels, and the inherent variability in sample sources. It is essential to understand these limitations and consider the possibility of an age range rather than a single definitive date. There you go. The person I was talking about, an evolutionary geneticist. That's one heck of a title.
It kind of segues.
Said something to the effect that although the study's conclusions were plausible, they were far from certain, and more evidence was needed to be sure. Okay.
That segues into one of my favorite stories I've been following for the last, I don't know, few years is Göbekli Tepe, which is an 11,600-year-old monolithic site where we were supposed to be hunters and gatherers. No such site should have even exist if our modern history is correct, which of course it is not. It sort of dates back to all the flood dates, all that stuff. But Göbekli Tepe, they are saying they cannot excavate it because they don't have the technology to do so. Now, this is sand and dirt. So my opinion has always been that the shovel was perfected several centuries ago. And we have excavated, the Sphinx from under all miles of sand 100 years ago. So they're trying to keep Göbekli Tepe from us for some reason. And it needs to be a much bigger deal. If we want to truly understand our history, Göbekli Tepe is a huge key to that puzzle. And
what country is that in?
It's interestingly enough, it's in eastern Turkey, right on the Syrian border. Just happens to be we've been fighting wars for the last, I don't know, decade.
Mm-hmm.
Make it even harder. But there's some guy, and I'm not going to remember his name. He's in charge of the excavation. He keeps coming out and saying, "Oh, we just don't have the technological ability to actually excavate it. And, oh, we have no intention of doing so. Why not? It's our shared history. Tell us what the hell's going on there. Let's see it. Because with history, we're told is that we were hunters and gatherers, and we would not have had monolithic, and this is a pretty big site. It's probably I mean, I think the whole site's bigger than like 2 football fields, if I have that right. And it's real. It exists. They can't deny that. But it changes the entire written history of mankind because we were just, supposed to be coming out of the Ice Age and we're hunters and gatherers. But apparently that's not the case. It suggests some of the theories like Atlantis and advanced human technology prior to the Great Flood actually did exist. And it's one of many examples of why that may be the case. But I think this one's the key to unlocking that mystery. And I'd sure as heck like to know the truth.
Well, given that there is ground penetrating radar.
Oh, we've got all that.
I know. Excuse me. To make the statement that they don't have the technology, is that because they didn't order it? Or it doesn't exist? It sounds like they didn't order it. Because if you can excavate all of Egypt and everywhere else, you can excavate this. And given that when they go in there, they don't go in with a big shovel and a pickaxe, they go in with a brush.
Yeah, that's the whole point. We perfected he says we don't have the technology to dig dirt away from a stone structure.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I've watched Indiana Jones, and I watched them do this.
Yeah.
Now, just to stay on this topic of our fake history that we've been told.
Keep going.
It's when I've talked to a lot of Christians that are what we call young earthers. They believe that the Bible is word for word correct.
Mm-hmm.
I know a couple of really good biblical scholars, and both Christian and Jewish, that make their case very well. I don't agree with their case, but they make it well, and it basically dates the Earth to be about 6,000 years old. There's a couple problems with that theory. To me, scientifically,
only a couple.
Well, there's a few. Go back to being one of it, but one of my favorites is the Sphinx, because the Sphinx was brought from a quarry not too far away. And in that quarry, you see a bunch of very big vertical pockmarks that can only be caused by torrential rain that did not happen in that part of the world. Well, it has not happened since 11,600 years ago. Here's that date again. Isn't that interesting? That's the Sphinx. But the other thing that gets me, one of the really good clues, is the pyramids, which started showing up just under 6,000 years ago. But the older ones are larger and more complex than the newer ones. And that is not the sign of a civilization on the rise. It's a sign of a civilization on decline. So I've got questions, and I think they need to be answered.
Well, what's interesting is you have the big pyramids in Egypt, and they seem to be pretty big. And then I know there are other places, but I've been to the two outside of Mexico City, the sun and the moon. And they're pretty good size too. How do you have basically the same shape structure
in two different cultures that have never met
that far away?
Yes. And there's some in South America as well.
Yeah.
There's probably, I believe there's some pyramidal structures in Africa as well. There's Asia's got some very interesting structures as well. And it's not just that, but every single one of these cultures that theoretically have never met all have stories of a flood. All of them. The flood legend is everywhere. That cannot be a coincidence. It had to have happened.
The other thing that's interesting from what I've seen every once in a while regarding one of the pyramids in Egypt is that it has internal tunnels or passageways. This is an amazing thing.
Yeah, and I've been doing some reading on that. Not as much as I'd like to, because I find it a fascinating topic. Randall Carlson is my favorite guy to read on this stuff.
Okay.
He's on Joe Rogan about once a year. He's got his Squaring the Circle, I believe, is his Brumble channel, where he goes into this stuff in a lot of depth, probably too deep for me to watch on a regular basis, but he's great. The other real big question that comes up there is, well, let's not go there. Let's not go there tonight. That'll take up the entire show. Let's move on. It's a fun. I don't want to hijack all of their wackadoodle news.
Well, this is kind of wacky, but very serious. And I just saw this, and I'm just beginning to learn about it. I've known the term, but I never processed it to myself, really. And you know the term microplastics?
I do.
Okay. Well, I thought, I don't have to worry about this. Apparently, I might have to. And I'm going to kind of read a little bit of this. And the topic or the question on the article is, what is in your drink? You might want to think twice before reaching for that piping hot cup of tea. We have a new study from the University of Birmingham, and it revealed that every beverage tested, from soda and juice to coffee and tea, contains microplastics, which are tiny fragments of plastic that have infiltrated nearly every part of our environment, including what we drink. Have you heard about this?
I have.
Okay. Researchers have analyzed 155 popular beverages sold in the UK markets, coffee shops, and found microplastic contamination in 100% of the samples. While plastic particles were found across the board, the levels varied dramatically, and temperature turned out to be a major factor in how much plastic ends up in your drink. Did you know that?
I think I've heard that.
Okay. According to the researchers. Now, do they drink hot tea in England?
From what I'm told.
Okay. According to the researchers, hot tea had the highest concentration of microplastics, with 49 to 81 particles per liter. That's more than double the amount found in iced tea. So the culprit is, of course, heat. They found presence of microplastics in all cold and hot drinks they looked at, which is pretty alarming. But drinks served at higher temperatures show significantly higher microplastic concentrations. And the study suggests that heat accelerates the release of these particles, particularly disposable cups. Hot tea served in a standard takeaway container had an average of 22 microplastics per cup, while tea brewed in a glass container only had 14. Cold drinks generally had fewer, but they weren't clean. You got them in juice, you got them in energy drinks, you got them in soft drinks. Now the range is from 1 nanometer to 5 millimeters. And it comes from the packaging material, processing equipment, everything. Now, these particles are too small to see with your naked eye. So what does it mean? Well, they're investigating what the ingestion is going to do. But the problem is these microplastics can be found in critical organs. Bloodstream, brain, lungs, kidney. And they may damage cells. Now, next time you go out, go shopping, look at how many things that you buy are in or wrapped with plastic. What kind of container does your toothpaste come in? What kind of container does your dental floss come in? Wonder if you decide to go get some sliced cheese. You see where I'm going. Your thoughts?
Well, prior to COVID, I was a very avid scuba diver all over the world. And I still subscribe to many of the scuba diving periodicals and get all their emails. And there's been a lot of talk over the last decade about the microplastics in the ocean that our fish are eating and just basically breathing in, eating. And so now you've got microplastics in everything we pull out of the ocean, your star-kissed tuna to your lobster, your Maine lobster. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's pervasive, and it is a big problem. But it's all in the name of commerce. We're able to mass produce more food to more people and make more profits. So we didn't bother with the safety tests, and we ignored all the warnings.
What were the warnings?
Well, I think the warnings have been there forever. It's just it's just like with everything else. If the doctors, raise the alarm, the people who funded research decided they wouldn't get funded anymore. And that's basically your FDA at its finest, the Food and Drug Administration, coincidentally created by the Rockefellers, who had a monopoly on the oil refining process. And it is from oil refining process that we get plastics in the first place. They didn't want to hurt their business, so they took over the medical schools and our food regulators. That's why this happens. It's just pure greed. Same people also happen to be sponsoring things like depopulation, the Malthusians and stuff, climate change, all that. It's no coincidence. It's just all connected. And it certainly is not for the betterment of mankind. It's for the betterment of their, whatever their New World Order scheme is. But it all ties together. It's all part of the same super plot. And no, this is not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy fact.
Thank you for that. That was let's see. Oh, this one I think I might like.
Read the one I sent you.
No, no, we're coming to that.
All
We
right,
will.
good. I don't want to miss that one.
No, we're got over an hour. Uh, Now, I talk about money every once in a while, right?
Every once in a while.
Yeah. And the there's this there's this thing called, and I haven't read it yet, but it's called the Genius Act. And according to this article, the Genius Act is poised to steal our money. And they may use the Vietnam model of freezing accounts. Well, I think freezing accounts could also be considered the Canadian model. Remember that? The truckers?
Oh, it's about to become apparently the British model as well.
Well, they're talking about stable coin. This article is talking about, do you know the name Jim Rickards?
I do.
Okay. Jim Rickards opposed Russia's condemnation of the U.S. Genius Act as a way of the U.S. to offload its debt and explain that the world is not dumping U.S. dollars, but instead there is a dollar shortage. Have you heard about that?
I have. I follow this story very closely.
Well, interject anytime you want, please. The U.S. and NATO are in the process, according to this article, stealing $300 billion in frozen assets from Russia as part of the Ukraine war settlement. Russia invested $150 billion in gold bullion, which has helped insulate Russia. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm not going to relitigate the Ukraine-Russia war on this.
Yeah, no, not that. No.
Okay, do you just want to talk about the currency manipulation, everything like that? And I wish I'd known you were going to bring this up because I would have had this stuff ready, but I would recommend everybody do is just go look at some GDP charts globally since 2021, and Russia's GDP has actually grown despite all of the sanctions. And they have a much more sound currency. And I do need to bring this up. Russia's foreign policy has been very plain for the world to see since about 1998, when a guy by the name of Primakov wrote the Primakov Doctrine. Primakov was one of the, shall we say, mentors of Putin, and also their brilliant foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. They were both disciples of Primakov. But the Primakov Doctrine had three main pillars of Russian foreign policy. And number one, most important thing to Russia, was to escape what they call the Anglo-American rules-based order, the hegemony, the dollar-based hegemony. They wanted to get off, and they're accomplishing it. Now, how does that tie back into what you're saying about cryptocurrency and gold? It absolutely does, because this is all in play. Obviously the dollar has a limited shelf life because of our 38 trillion and counting debt.
Has it gone over 37?
I thought we were 38 last time I checked. I'll pull up the debt clock for you if you want.
Okay. Well, let me explain. I opened with talking about the Vietnam model.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently the Vietnam model is this. Vietnam froze or erased 80, this is what the article says, 86 million bank accounts. Biometric identification is mandatory, and those who refuse to comply were affected by having their accounts frozen or erased.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. And again, England, Keir Starmer just came out like in the last week and said, you're going to have to get a digital ID or you will not be able to, you won't be able to function in our economy. And this is going to happen. Well,
and Rickards pointed out that Vietnam is a communist country. We know that. And this is a trial run. Yeah, we're at 37 trillion. Okay.
A couple more days, we ought to be at 38. And that's just federal government debt. So
it doesn't include what one economist said some time ago as the unfunded liabilities.
Yep.
And what I know the unfunded liabilities to be, and share with me if you know more, is Social Security.
Medicaid as well.
Well, yeah, that too now. And that this was, I think this is, I'm going to say 2013, 2014 when I read this article. And the author, well-known economist, said that at that point in time, the unfunded liabilities, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, was over $100 trillion. This is separate and apart from the national debt. One last thing on this is that Rickards said that stable coins are dangerous because the sponsors are unregulated and they can steal the money. So, what are your thoughts? Any more?
Yeah, I wanted to, there's something in chat I wanted to,
yeah, please.
I just got to go up a little bit. So chat's pretty busy today. They're doing good. If I can find it in 2 seconds, I'll read it. If not, Triple T Anon says Kimchi One is doing some stuff about getting the plastics out of your system and food and stuff like that. So I am going to bookmark Kimchi One and see what the heck he's talking about, because I know what kimchi is, but I've not heard of what he's talking about. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
Okay.
Looks like there's a bunch of you can buy Kimchi One on Amazon. Okay, I'll check it out later. Thank you for that.
What is it?
Well, kimchi's some kind of health supplement.
Uh-huh.
It says it boosts digestion, immunity, and anti-aging, all that. But apparently, it's got something where somebody's working on the plastic stuff. I don't know. It's the first time I've heard of it, Alan. Don't ask me to answer the question. I have no idea.
Well, I didn't know that. Now I do.
It's
How do you spell it?
Kimchi?
Yeah.
Kimchi.
Okay. Thank you.
Because I've heard, I mean, you see kimchi supplements every time you go to the health store, stuff like that. I'm familiar with the term, but I didn't know about this particular use. And
interesting.
For those who don't know, the lady hamster is my wife is studying naturopathic medicine, so we're all into this stuff, natural cures and everything. I could one of these days I'll give you guys a tour of everything she's got me taking supplement wise.
Okay.
It's a lot of pills every day, but whatever. I feel great.
Why don't you tell me about the thing you sent me?
Well, I'll tell you what, I sent it to you so you could do it, and I don't have it up in front of me. So if you want to read that one.
Okay. But you had something you're going to surprise me with, right?
I got a few things to surprise you with, but this one's interesting. I'll read it. I got it right here.
Okay.
This is from Climate Depot, which is one of my favorite sites. It says, UK, funerals should comply with net zero. New rules could ban gas cremation ovens and introduce eco-friendly coffins. That's right. The green blob is going after your funerals. Goes on from the Telegraph. Funerals should comply with net zero, says Labor. New rules could ban gas cremation ovens and introduce eco-friendly coffins. I mean, do I even need to read this to point out how?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read it. You stop me whenever you're laughing too hard.
No, it's
Labor is plotting to make UK crematoria greener, because that's what I care about when I'm dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell you what, why don't you just bury me and let my nutrients refresh the soil? That's green. All right. Labor is plotting to make UK crematoria greener by banning gas cremation ovens and forcing grieving families to choose eco-friendly wicker or bamboo coffins. What's the point of a coffin with something that's biodegradable? Okay. New rules for crematoria drawn up by the UK Environment Department are set to be upgraded to meet both new pollution standards and the UK's commitment to reach the target of net zero by 2050, championed by Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. I'll read a little bit more because it hurts.
Can you explain net zero?
Yeah, I could definitely do that. The whole idea is we want to have a basically carbon neutral economy. But it also sort of like we had in the Stone Ages, if you want to really see what they're actually going for. But it goes deeper than that. All these net zero initiatives got really, really turbocharged right around 2020, 2021. and there's this thing called GFANS. It's a Glasgow something thing on net zero. The banks involved in this include all the usual suspects: Citibank, my old employer, J.P. Morgan, the big money laundering bank, HSBC, and of course the Rockefellers are involved in this 100% with his GFANS and net zero stuff. Interestingly enough, when I first did the report on this, I did a video on this 2 years ago. One of the major architects was a guy who used to be the president of the English, the Federal, whatever their version of the Federal Reserve, the English Central Bank, and the Canadian Central Bank. Guy by the name of Mark Carney, who is now the Prime Minister of Canada, even though he never got elected. That's the net zero people. Basically, they want you in your little. You're going to eat the bugs and like it. You're going to be buried in bamboo. This is net zero. It is going back to the Stone Ages, unless you're part of the elite, in which case you still fly around the world on your private jet, John Kerry, you asshole. All right, sorry about that. Anything else?
The the thing is that if you moved away from the gas-fired ones and you went to electricity, you'd be getting your electricity from wind or solar. Well, what happens if that energy source isn't there?
We got some great news on that this week. Trump is he just pulled something like $100 billion of Biden's green funding for wind and solar. All those projects are going to go bankrupt because they can't survive without subsidies because they don't work. They don't make productive energy. So there's a lot of those investments are going to just go, poof, not a moment too soon. The great green scam is getting its ass kicked.
But think about it. If these sources don't produce, then you have to go to the original sources to get the electricity. And one of the things I saw in that proposal is that they wanted to not lose the heat. They wanted the cremations to be done continuously. Just go one after another. And apparently in England, currently, well, as of 2023, about 80% of the people who pass are cremated.
How many? What percent?
80%.
In England?
Yeah. So that's a lot.
It is.
What do you got?
Yeah, I got some fun stuff for you.
Okay.
All right, let me pull this up. I've got to start with this one. Okay. This story is kind of a big deal, but it shows the idiocy. Did you hear about the Iowa educator that was an illegal alien? I got some details on that. So this is a thread on X from a guy by the name of Paul Morrow, and I didn't follow him before. I am following him now. It says, okay, let's see if I understand this one. The Des Moines School Board appointed Ian Andre Roberts to be superintendent of schools in 2023. His base salary started at $260,000. He was an illegal overstay who received a final deportation order in 2024 and who had a prior weapons charge from 2020 when they hired him. So he got a deportation order under Biden and yet still was the superintendent of schools in supposedly red state Iowa. Got it?
Yeah.
According to this, he had a doctorate in urban education leadership from St. John's University. According to St. John's University, I see no such degree offered. He had a fake degree. He was arrested after fleeing in his car, then on foot with $3,000 cash. A loaded gun was found in his car. This is the guy that these people decided should be the superintendent of schools, making over $300,000 a year.
Well, 270.
Well, he also gets an annuity worth like $38,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And a $600 a month car stipend.
Okay.
So it is over 300.
Mm.
Here's the board of geniuses that appointed him. Let's meet them. Here's where it gets good. Here's the board chair, Jackie Norris, former chief of staff to Michelle Obama. Oh, call me shocked. And here they talk about the base salary gets higher. The district will provide them the payment of a tax shelter annuity, et cetera, et cetera. Let me tell you more about Jackie Norris. You know what she's doing right now?
No, I don't.
She's running for Congress in Iowa. She wants to represent the state of Iowa after this freaking decision. Okay, he goes on. And of course, a goal, again, as per the Des Moines Register, Roberts will face a number of challenges as the district continues to roll out programs and curricula focused on equity in education and improving student outcomes while implementing laws that impact what can be taught in Iowa schools. Equity in education.
What does that mean?
That's all DEI bullshit. Sorry, I'm cussing tonight, but yeah, I'll tell you what, Alan. The last couple of weeks being on the show with you, I keep getting hot and bothered and going on rants.
I don't think it's a problem. Keep going.
The Register puts it, Roberts has been chosen as Des Moines Public Schools' next leader at a time when Iowa schools are navigating new laws restricting curriculum books and the rights of LGBTQ students. Restricting, right? Final post, and we wonder why our kids can't read, write, or do math, know no history, and can't hold a candle to kids overseas who are taught to do all these things. All this equity ain't working. So he continues, he goes, sorry, one more. Never even had a work authorization in the first place to work in this country. And one last comment. She is now, I'm sorry, she's running for the U.S. Senate, not Congress. That's Jackie Norris. So if you know anybody in Iowa, Big Red Iowa, you got a problem. I actually do have a bit more on her because, is that this? Nope, I guess that's all I have. So what do you think about that, Alan?
Well, apparently, school board didn't do much vetting.
Or they did.
Well, if they did, they didn't care.
If I go back to that picture of the school board, there are 6 white women in Des Moines. Yeah. All liberal. There's a moral to this, people. If you have the time or know people that do, you have got to get on your school boards. Get involved locally. That's how you prevent this from happening. Because these busybody leftists, they've got Soros money to prop them up. They've got the time and the money to do this. And they are destroying your kids all around the country, even in bright red Iowa.
How about the PTAs?
I've been to a number, over the last 5 years, I've spoken at a lot of school boards. You've done that a few times too. I know Doug does also. They don't listen. They're required by law to give you the microphone. It used to be 3 minutes. Now they're cutting it down to 1. And they sit there with a glazed look in their eyes and still do whatever the hell they want. I mean, you got to get really loud to make them pay attention. And I walked a beat up in Fallbrook, California, getting a school board member recalled so we could have a special election. That was right before I moved out east. And my understanding is the recall election, we got the person recalled but didn't get the desired result we wanted. But that's what's got to be done. You got to get involved because this is the future of our country. And these people are really well organized, really well funded, and they're going to continue to jam. But why an illegal alien? Why was it so important to have this guy? There was absolutely, this is criminal what they did to hire someone you couldn't do without any vetting whatsoever. I mean, I'd be suing.
I'm kind of wondering what the fallout will be as this gets to be known.
Well, it's making it around on a lot of news channels. This came out like 2-3 days ago. So,
but what will they do in Des Moines?
Well, that's interesting. All right, I've got another great one for you if you're ready for topics. This is a happy story.
Oh, good.
Believe it or not, it comes from NBC News. It says, poll, Gen Z's gender divide reaches beyond politics and into its views on marriage, children, and success. Pay attention to this one, people. Shout out to Patrick Bet David. I got turned on to this poll. I was watching the PBD show. really good podcast for you want an objective guy who's not really politically right. He's more middle of the road, but he gets things right. I enjoy the PVD podcast quite a bit, but that's where I got this from. But I definitely wanted to bring it tonight. Gen Z men who backed Trump in 2024 rated having children at the top of a list of choices of how to define personal success. Gen Z women who backed Harris rated it second to last. So just going through some of these polls. Trump approval overall and on the issues among Gen Z. Trump has a 47% approval rating overall among men and 26% among women. On border security and immigration, it's 46 to 24. On deportation, it's same 45-21. On trade, so basically men like Trump and women don't. How often do you feel anxious or worried about the future? Men, 19%. Women, all the time, 19% men, 33% women. Most of the time, more women than men. Sometimes more men than women. So women are more worried about the future. Yet they're the ones who don't want to have kids. Make sense to you yet, Alan?
No, it does not. Yeah.
Start thinking about attribution. When it comes to getting ahead in the workplace, it's better to be, again, green is male. It doesn't make a difference. Women think it's better to be a man, and most men think it doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
Women, with all this DEI, which means you hire minorities and women at a much greater, more favorable rate than men, still think if you want to get ahead in the workplace, it's better to be a man. When the statistics clearly show that there is a hiring bias in favor of women and minorities. Being a white man in America right now over the last decade, you have been you've basically been a subhuman.
Well, less desirable.
Well, yeah, that's what DEI does. So which of the following, okay, this is interesting. Which of the following traits do you think are important in getting ahead in the workplace? They both say communication, reliability, adaptability. They all agree. Till we get to number 5, where the women say empathy as opposed to competitiveness. So nothing really huge there. Women think empathy is more important. Their feelings. Where men think being competitive is how you get ahead.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is where it really gets good. The different visions of a successful life. Which of the following is important to your personal definition of success? And between male and female, they both have number 1, having a job or career you find fulfilling. Number 2 is having enough money to do the things you want to do. Number 3, they both agree, achieving financial independence. Number 4, the women say having emotional stability. With men, that's down at number 10. Number 4 with men is using your talents and resources to help others, which is number 5 for women. They both have owning your own home at 6. Having no debt, 7. Men say being married is number 7 and having children is 8, while women have that down at 10 and 11.
Wow.
And the last one they both have is being able to retire early and fame and influence. But we broke it down further. And they said, well, now we have female voted for Harris, male voted for Harris, female voted for Trump, and male voted for Trump. The most important things of males who voted for Trump is having children. That's Charlie Kirk for you right there, guys. That is the Charlie Kirk impact. Number 4 for the men was being married. Even women who voted for Trump said having children and being married are much higher than Harris voters, who said almost dead last on the list was being married and having children. These are women who voted for Kamala Harris. Now, where are these different attitudes coming from, Alan?
Where do you think?
I absolutely know where it's coming. It's coming from from schools. It's the DEI stuff. It's the garbage, this woke nonsense being shoved down our throat that appeals to women, young women, and does not appeal to young men. I'll tell you what this tells me.
Tell me.
If I'm a young conservative woman, I've got my pick of the litter. Because there's a lot of good young men, conservative men, and they all want to get married and have kids. I get, this is a buyer's market. I am a rare commodity. It also tells me that if I'm a left-leaning woman, I'm going to have a very lonely life, full of stress. And that's exactly what we see acted out every single day on campuses and on the streets. So I don't know how we fix it. Got any thoughts?
Yeah, I do actually.
Share them,
Um,
please.
well, this is going to go far ranging for a moment, but and we touched about it. We recently touched on it, which is the unfunded liabilities of Social Security. According to the trustees of Social Security, by the mid 2030s, all the surplus that had been accumulated over the decades, because more came in than went out, will finally be spent. And the way that surplus has been accumulated over the decades is Social Security would buy treasuries because that's the only place it could put it. It was not allowed to buy stocks in the market, which means one of the big buyers of treasuries is going away. In fact, they've gone away because they're not buying anything new. They're just, if they have to, they'll roll over what they have, but it's all going to be gone. And with a reduced population, there's less people to pay in. That's the problem. And if you want more AI in the workforce, then you have fewer places for people to work. That's the problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is not really high level math, but it's worth talking
It's
about.
arithmetic.
One of the problems with setting up social welfare systems is the future generations have to pay for the retiring generations. That works if you have a steady population or a growing one. That's not the case in the world today. And I've brought this point up before, but every single country around the world right around World War II had a baby boom. Then the next generations were smaller. And that's me. I'm Gen X. My parents were baby boomers. Only two major population centers in the world had an echo boom. So you had a big and then a smaller and then an echo. And those two countries were the United States and India. Of course, half of India apparently is here on an H-1B visa, or at least that was happening. We'll see how much longer that happens. The rest of the world, including especially China, with their one-child policy, have got a diminishing younger generation, smaller population. They're going to lose several hundred million in population over the next 10 or 20 years. You can't sustain a social welfare system with a declining population unless productivity goes through the roof. Now, this comes into the conversation about immigration, but you're not supporting a retiring population with low skilled workers. You need to replace it with highly skilled workers or more productive workers here at home. Now, I'm here to tell you, we got plenty of skilled people that are out of work in America here. People living on the streets homeless. We just took care of them. They could be very productive members. Silicon Valley does not need to be giving jobs to Indian engineers at half the price. Sorry, it doesn't work. And that's all going to change. But we do have a serious arithmetic problem with this stuff. And now you look at the vision of the left, and they want the government to pay for everything from cradle to grave. They want, what is it? What's the term they use for annual budget or a minimum income? Basic guaranteed GBI, guaranteed basic income.
Yeah.
That's what they're pushing for here. You can't afford it, and they know it, or the people pushing them know this. So their plan has to be to crash the damn system and replace it with something else. And this is once again, goes back to your new world order. The people that want to destroy the Western civilization, this is exactly what they're doing. And they have brainwashed the women in America, young women, into believing this stuff because feelings are more important than actually working. I don't know, maybe stay home, raise a family. If we stop inflating real estate prices and all that sort of thing. But that's the direction we're going. And this is the major civilizational societal clash that is being fought right in front of us. and we have to win because losing is something we'll never come back from.
Well, this is playing into the World Economic Forum, I believe,
Yeah, 100%. All right.
because
Yeah.
with the Great Reset, which was published by the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, his take on it is that one of the comments is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. When they say you'll own nothing, you won't own a home. Yeah, you can find it in the Great Reset that was published by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic.
Can I take what you just said and run with it a little bit?
Please do.
Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, founded in 1971. Klaus Schwab in the 1960s was a Rockefeller stooge. 1971, Rockefeller stooge, Kissinger goes over to China and basically kicks Taiwan out of the UN and opens up China. Nixon would visit shortly thereafter, but this is once again Rockefellers. Same time, Rockefeller stooge, a Canadian by the name of Maurice Strong, gets a job with the United Nations, which was founded by the Rockefellers and sits at One Rockefeller Plaza. Yeah, that's right. He joins the United Nations and starts the entire climate alarmist movement. Started out with global cooling, now it's global warming. That was another Rockefeller stooge. This all happened in 1971 to 73. Do you think that's a coincidence? The same people that talk about, I don't know, Malthusian depopulation and New World Order. Do you think there's any coincidence that all those things happen at the exact same time?
Not really.
No, not really at all. So if I,
It's so the Great Reset was published, excuse me, in 2020.
the book?
Yeah.
No, I think it's older than that. The first one he wrote.
Well,
Yeah, that's a
the
different
version
book.
I'm looking at is dated 2020.
Yeah, I'll look it up. The first book he wrote was like 1973 that talks about all this stuff like that. And he does talk about the New World Order and everything like that. And, this goes back to, Masonic writings, from order chaos. I'm sorry, from chaos order. This is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to create the chaos so they can come in. It's the Hegelian dialectic. Manufacture a crisis and then come in there with a solution. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, Hegelian dialectic. This is Marxist. This is Marxist core fundamental philosophy. And it goes back to the Fabian socialists in 1800s. Lord Milner, Cecil Rhodes, all of these things. The richest, most powerful people in the world have been orchestrating this. Communism was about the violent overthrow and immediate revolution today. That didn't work because guess what? In the Western world, the working class didn't feel like we were really being abused. So it didn't happen. So they decided to go with a slow walk through the institutions. And that's what we're living through today. Another word for it is technocracy, which was really popular in the 20s and 30s, coming out of the Gilded Age, and that comes from Fabianism.
Mm-hmm.
It disappeared, technocracy, from the lexicon of conversation because, Hitler was a technocrat, and they saw the experiments on human beings, and people were appalled. And we didn't see technocracy really come back into our language until the 21st century, just like we didn't hear, progressivism. All these words were canceled for almost 100 years. Well, now they're here. And if you look around our universities, our government, all these administrative positions, local, everything, these NGOs, these think tanks, these are all technocrats. The technocracy is here. The question is, can we pull it back before it's too late?
I think we can.
We can. We still have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But it's going to be ugly, and these people are going to scream because they're offended. Because you're a racist, Alan.
Well, when you say that, what do you mean?
I just mean you disagree with me, therefore you're a racist, fascist, something a phobe.
Oh, okay.
Because I only operate on emotion.
Can we have a discussion about that? And
shut up, fascist.
Okay, that's a no. You got anything else to surprise me with?
Yeah, I got one more for you.
Okay.
This should be good. Actually, I may have two more, but this should be pretty good. And it's one of your favorite topics, so we'll do it. All right, Trump to the United Nations. Y'all see Donald Trump talk to the United Nations last week, where they shut off the escalator right before he got on it and killed his took down his teleprompter, tried to sabotage his speech, which is the dumbest thing you can do because now you got Trump up there talking without a teleprompter, so he's going to go off script. Well, he did.
So they shut down the escalator, so he had to walk up?
Yeah, him and Melania had to walk up. He did it no problem. He's in pretty good shape for a guy his age and size. Of course, he's a golfer. He's used to walking. And Melania, of course, is, obviously the epitome of grace. But he was pissed. I don't blame him.
Did it start working after he left?
It was working right before, and I believe it probably worked after. And the United Nations trying to say, oh, this just happens. But apparently, and I saw this on Twitter, guy says, my brother's an escalator tech. And no, there's like 3 buttons you have to push. For it to shut down, there's actually, to set off the safety version, something actually has to be jammed in the escalator. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen. So someone had to press like 3 separate buttons to make it stop. So it was deliberate sabotage.
Oh, jeez.
But let's just listen to it in his own words.
Okay, good deal.
I should have volume, so I'll share it again. Share sound. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear the volume when I hit play.
Okay.
But we're not letting this happen in America. In 1982, the executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program predicted that by the year 2000, climate change would cause a global catastrophe. He said that it will be irreversible, as any nuclear holocaust would be. This is what they said at the United Nations. What happened? Here we are. Another UN official stated in 1989 that within a decade, entire nations could be wiped off the map by global warming. Not happening. It used to be global cooling. If you look back years ago in the 1920s and the 1930s, they said, global cooling will kill the world. We have to do something. Then they said global warming will kill the world, but then it started getting cooler, so now they could just call it climate change, because that way they can't miss. It's climate change, because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling, all of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, They actually said during the campaign they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything. And I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail. And if you don't stop people that you've never seen before, that you have nothing in common with, your country is going to fail. I'm the president of the United States, but I worry about Europe. I love Europe. I love the people of Europe. And I hate to see it being devastated by energy and immigration. This double-tailed monster destroys everything in its wake, and they cannot let that happen any longer. You're doing it because you want to be nice. You want to be politically correct, and you're destroying your heritage. They must take control strongly and immediately of the unmitigated immigration disaster and the fake energy catastrophe before it's too late. The carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions, and they're heading down a path of total destruction. The carbon footprint was a big, big thing a few years ago. I remember hearing about the carbon footprint, and then President Obama would get into Air Force One, a massive Boeing 747, and not a new one, an old one with old engines that spew everything into the atmosphere. He'd talk about the carbon footprint. We must do so. Then he'd get in and he'd fly from Washington to Hawaii to play a round of golf. And then he'd get back onto that big, beautiful plane and he'd fly back and he'd talk about, again, global warming and the carbon footprint. It's a con job. At extreme cost and expense, Europe reduced its own carbon footprint by 37%. Think of that. Congratulations, Europe. Great job. You cost yourself a lot of jobs, a lot of factories closed, but you reduced the carbon footprint by 37%. However, for all of that sacrifice and much more, it's been totally wiped out and then some by a global increase of 54%. Much of it coming from China and other countries that are thriving around China, which now produces more CO2 than all the other developed nations in the world. So all of these countries are working so hard on the carbon footprint, which is nonsense, by the way. It's nonsense. You know, it's interesting. In the United States, we have still radicalized environmentalists, and they want the factories to stop. Everything should stop. No more cows. We don't want cows anymore. I guess they want to kill all the cows. They want to do things that are just unbelievable, and you have it too. But you know, we have a border, strong, and we have a shape, and that shape doesn't just go straight up. That shape is amorphous when it comes to the atmosphere. And if we had the most clean air, and I think we do, we have very clean air. We have the cleanest air we've had in many, many years. But the problem is that other countries, like China, which has air that's a little bit rough, it blows. And no matter what you're doing down here, the air up here tends to get very dirty because it comes in from other countries where their air isn't so clean. And the environmentalists refuse to acknowledge that. Same thing with garbage. In Asia, they dump much of their garbage right into the ocean. And over about a 1 week and 2 week journey, it flows right past Los Angeles. You've seen it. Massive amounts of garbage, almost too much to do anything about, flowing past Los Angeles, past San Francisco, and then somebody will get in trouble because he dropped a cigarette on the beach. The whole thing is crazy. The primary effect of these brutal green energy policies has not been to help the environment, but to redistribute manufacturing and industrial activity from developed countries that follow the insane rules that are put down to polluting countries that break the rules and are making a fortune. They're making a fortune.
I think he watches our show, Alan.
He hit on a lot of topics. He could have added one thing. Well, a couple of things, actually. Thank you for sharing that.
No, I think that, you know, but just picture this. That's without his teleprompter.
Yeah. He mentioned cows because that's methane, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know how much methane is approximately has been measured in our atmosphere?
Well, I do because I talk to you all the time. So go ahead and tell everyone who doesn't talk to you all the time.
Well, the three main gases are measured generally in percentages: nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. Nitrogen, these are round numbers. Nitrogen is 78%, oxygen is 21%, and argon is 0.93%. That means 99.93% of our entire atmosphere are those three gases. CO2, which is the bad boy, you know, the thing that helps feed our trees or plants or grass or flowers, right? Kind of necessary.
Kind of.
That's usually measured in parts per million, ppm. And it's around 425, which translates into about 0.04%, 0.04. Remember, there's only 0.07 left after nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. But in that context, CO2 is 425 per million. And methane is a whopping 1.9 parts per million. So if you move it up to 2, the percent is 0.0002%, 2/10,000ths of 1%. And this is why we have to stop raising cattle and eating red meat. Can you explain to me why that is?
I cannot.
It seems pretty de minimis to me. And methane lasts about 12 years, give or take. CO2 can last 100, few hundred, maybe up to 1,000. But there is a gas out there, and every once in a while I go to the EPA website just to confirm that it's there, and if you want to do this while I'm talking, do that. And this is a gas that is not talked about. It's called SF6, sulfur hexafluoride, 1 sulfur, 6 fluorides. It's a human-made gas, not a natural-made gas like CO2 and methane. And it is used in the electrical transmission and production activities. So it's great at preventing arcing, okay? But it's a human-made gas. If you had an equal amount of CO2 and SF6, Brady, which one would withhold or hold more heat? CO2 or SF6?
I'm told it's SF6.
It is. Do you know how much more than CO2?
You told me this before, but go ahead.
You want to go look it up on the EPA website?
I'm going to EPA.
Okay, and just put in SF6. Should get a 1-pager.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and share the screen to make sure I'm looking in the right place.
Okay. You're such a good screen sharer. I so appreciate that.
Yeah, I can actually navigate a mouse relatively well. All right,
You're wonderful. Okay, keep going. Usually there was a 1-page sheet.
The basics?
Yeah, try there. Okay, stop, go up a bit, right there. Okay, under greenhouse gas, you will see over a 100-year period, SF6 is 23,500 times more effective at trapping infrared radiation than an equivalent amount of CO2. There you go.
It's also a very stable chemical with an atmospheric lifetime of greater than 1,000 years. How long did you say methane?
Well, methane's 12.
And this would be about 80 times greater
But
than that.
I'm going to have to look at this because the one that I have, again, they may change things over time, is, wait a minute, CO2 is, well, CO2 can last up to 1,000. My research said that SF6 can last up to 3,000, which is an estimate because it hasn't been around that long.
Yeah, they're saying greater than 1,000 years. But again, methane is 12 years, and we need to kill the cows.
But this can withhold more heat than CO2 equal amount by 23,500 times. Is anybody talking about SF6? No.
Well,
But you want to go more electrical and put more SF6 into the air because it's going to leak in manufacturing, transportation, and use. Okay?
Approximately 67% of all SF6 emissions in the United States is attributed to the electrical transmission and distribution sector in 2022.
There you go. So it's they're not talking about what's out there. So yes, criticizing the raising of cattle, I don't agree with. The fact that it's such a de minimis amount and it lasts so little in our atmosphere, it shouldn't even be a topic. But I'll tell you what is, since this was what's discussed at the UN, another thing that's not talked about but you kind of mentioned it, you're talking about the pyramids, is that the Earth goes through glacial and interglacial time periods. And based on my research, excuse me, Mama Earth has been in an interglacial time period for 12,000 years, which means for 12,000 years, the planet has been warming.
But wait, let me stop you there. Doesn't that kind of correspond with that earlier 11,600 year period I was talking about earlier?
Yes,
Gee, is that a coincidence?
no,
Thank you.
and according to the research I've done, it's estimated because no one was back there measuring it. At the end of because Earth goes from glacial to interglacial, and at the end of the last glacial period, moving into the interglacial, it is estimated sea levels were down, not out from the current shoreline, but physically down 400 feet. And the ice on top of the Arctic, Canada, that part of the world, 2 miles thick. So they've been melting a long time, a very long time.
Let me add to that with some more recent climate data.
Please.
Because when they tell us, oh, we're going to die because the world is getting warmer, it turns out that the warmer periods in human history is when humanity has thrived. The golden age of Rome was in a very warm period. The next really cold period was what's known as the medieval ice age. The dark ages, it was very cold in Europe. Humanity didn't do very well. It warms up again and we get this thing called the Renaissance. Cools off again until the 1840s, and all of a sudden we get the Industrial Revolution. Humanity thrives when it's warmer. You know who else likes CO2? These green things we call plants, a lot of them trees, which we actually eat. And so apparently over the last 30 years, the green coverage on this planet has gone up by over 20 to 30%. That's a good thing, Alan, when plants are doing well. That's good for everybody. The animals eat more, we eat more. These people want us to go colder. And the last point, of course, it's something you've hammered home a million times over. CO2 does not lead temperature change. Temperature change leads CO2 throughout history. We've got that in the ice cores and all the other simuluses. So this entire scam that Trump called out, he's 100% correct. And we're bankrupting all of the developed economies for the sake of Gaia, this Church of Gaia. But that's not why we're doing it, because the people who invented this, once again, are the ones who want us dead. They want a return to a global feudalism known as the New World Order. Thank you, Rockefellers.
You know the name Henry Kissinger.
Rockefeller stooge.
Well, there's a quote that I'm going to tweak a bit that was attributed to him that kind of plays into this. He said, oil, I'll say energy. When you control energy, you'll control a country. He said food. When you control food, you'll control people. Kind of things that we're talking about. Then a friend of mine and I came up with this. When you control information and data, you control minds. But the overlay of this is when you own and control the monetary system of the country, you will own and control energy, food, and data. Are our sources of energy trying to be controlled? Yes. Are our sources of food trying to be controlled? Yes. Are our sources of information and data trying to be controlled?
You know who the first person to talk about peak oil was? John Davison Rockefeller, 1870s. He had a monopoly on oil refineries. They think if he created an artificial scarcity, price goes up. Right here, I just typed in a search, the Malthus graph. This is the entire concept between these global shortages. And it says, in the red, this is our resources, and in the blue is our population growth. When they cross over, it is a point of crisis. That's how simple his math was. What he didn't realize is this thing called human ingenuity. We can find ways of producing food more efficiently, which we do. Mm-hmm. We're very creative creatures. That's why we're at the top of the food chain. They ignore that completely. They have to have their artificial scarcity so they can take control. Once again, Hegelian dialectic, manufacture a crisis and use it to increase your own power. This is exactly what's going on. It's been being done to humanity for almost 200 years because of this stupid freaking graph. by Thomas Malthus.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The, you know, they were all about Rockefeller. They were all about eliminating competition.
100%.
They didn't want competition.
No, competition is a sin. That's the famous quote.
So to me, when we talk about what's missing in the context, and I didn't think we'd go here today, but we're here, is that if you're going to talk about climate, fine. I believe in climate change. Spring, summer, fall, winter, that's a lot of change. The thing is that outside of our CO2, which is now at 425 parts per million, or 0.04% of the total atmosphere, which to me seems pretty de minimis. Outside of that, what else is going on our planet that is not being talked about? And there's a few things. And I think these things are much greater in importance and effect than how much CO2 we have. And as you said, heat comes before the CO2, not the other way around. Number one, it's what the sun does. The sun's constantly on, thankfully, but it's not on at the same level all the time. And they figured out the sun goes through solar cycles, which are about 11 years long. And within a solar cycle, each year might be more or less, but overall the cycles might be maximum, which means they're producing more than the average number of solar flares, minimum, less than average, and regular, the average number. If you don't know what the sun's doing, then you can't judge what's happening on this planet. That's what I call the heat generation factor. Then you have Mama Earth, beautiful Mama Earth. She has a tilt on her axis, and she has a wobble pathway around the sun. Depending on the tilt and the wobble will depend on how much heat can or will not be received. I call that the heat reception factor, excuse me. And the other one that it can be massive when it happens, but it doesn't happen often. I've talked about this before. 1815, a volcano in the Indonesia, Mount Tambora, blew. It was so massive. It put up so much sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere that in 1816, because there was so much reflection, 1816 was known as the year without a summer. Heat couldn't get in. That's the heat reflection factor. If you're not talking about these three factors and you're just jumping to CO2, you're out of context. Completely out of context. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yet none of these things are talked about in the media, in the normal course of this discussion, which I keep wondering why.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with following the money. We've got these, shall we say, elites that control our institutions. They control what gets funded by our universities and scientists. So what you do is you apply for a grant to study something, and what the people writing the checks are gonna ask you is what's your foregone conclusion, your preordained conclusion? Because if it's not what we want, you're not getting funded. And I've done a number of shows on Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, concubine of Jeffrey Epstein. He had a near monopoly on the peer review process in the scientific journals starting after Sputnik in the 1950s. They control what gets funded and what doesn't. They control what gets researched and what doesn't. So if you actually disagree with this climate nonsense and you're a scientist, you're not going to get tenure at the university. You're not going to get your research funded. You're not going to get your papers peer reviewed. They completely own the science. And it's not science anymore, because the whole point of science is to throw out a hypothesis and let other people test it and recreate it. And if they can't do it, it's not your thesis is invalid. But you've decided your thesis is valid in advance because it suits your globalist narrative, and people that speak out get hammered down. That is the problem. And once again, it's the same freaking people that we've been demonizing all night.
And that's why what we do is so important, because as we're finding out, this topic hasn't gone away. It shows up in different forms, but it hasn't gone away. And this idea of too many people, that's scary.
So I've flown from California to the East Coast, either New York or Boston, a number of times, and I look down. I always get a window seat when I can, and I believe the number is something like 88% of the time you are looking down on land where no human beings ever set foot, or at least in over 150 years. So we don't lack land. And I also read something, I don't know if it's true or not, I've never done the math, but you take every single citizen of the United States of America, put it in Texas, give everybody a quarter acre, and they could all fit in Texas. We don't lack land or resources. What we lack is common sense.
You mentioned I guess we'll stay on this topic. You mentioned cold and heat. The human being apparently has quite the ability to adapt, and it has. You have humans in Alaska, okay? You have humans in the desert and everywhere else. But imagine going back in time, if this is correct, go back to the last glacial period ending approximately 12,000 years ago. Go back to the time where there's ice on top of the Arctic 2 miles thick, and it's estimated that on the island of Manhattan, New York, the ice was 1,000 feet thick. So take that latitude and take it across the country and get an idea of how much ice is on the ground. Where do you grow food? Where do you live? Okay, we humans, as you said, do so much better in more temperate climates where you can live without having polar bear skin on you, where you can grow food, where you can find running water, on and on and on. Let's say, for example, the planet is heating up. Let's say, for example, that the glaciers are melting. Well, is this something that just happened in the last 30 years? I don't think so. It's kind of interesting. Let me do this. I looked at something today, and it plays in, and I'm going to read this. And I was wondering, has the sea ever, through natural events, covered cities in the past? Well, apparently the oldest city that was occupied is Peloponnese, and it was occupied up to 1200 BC. That's underwater. There's another place off the coast of Israel. It's a prehistoric settlement, dates back to an earlier period, but it's a submerged city. Dwarka in India, same thing. Another place in Egypt. The idea is that places have been going underwater for quite some time. Is that because way back then, thousands and thousands of years ago, all these people started driving their SUVs to their jobs at the coal-fired power plants? Or has Mama Earth just been warming? She's been warming. And we people, huh?
And that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing for us. And the other thing is that do we, and I'm at straight up question, straight up, or questions. Brady, do humans have any ability to affect what the sun does?
As far as I know, we do not.
Okay. And it's about 94 million miles from us. Do we have the ability to affect Mama Earth's tilt and wobble?
We don't.
I don't think so we do. And I guess we could possibly create heat reflection by lighting up a volcano, but there's people who want to do this. They want to put stuff in the air to reflect the heat back because we're too warming. Well, if we started getting really cold and we lose our CO2, what's going to happen to all the plants that we want to eat? They're going to go away. We've done this before, but this to me is still a very, very important topic because it keeps coming up in different forms. And it's very helpful for people to get educated about it and be able to talk about it. Anything in the chat that we should address?
Oh, quite a bit. Oliver 2452 mentions Atlantis, and I typed back, we don't have time for me to go into my Atlantis diatribe. I will say it's one of my life's goals is to spend every damn penny I've ever saved up and go on the dive that discovers Atlantis. I do believe Atlantis existed.
Okay.
I've been, there's a lot of really good theories on that one, but I do believe it. And something we've talked about, the sea level of the last 11,600 years ago has gone up about 400 feet.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this on this show before, but I'll repeat it. There is a site off of Japan where they have rectangular shaped blocks about 400 feet below sea level. My best friend and my diving guru, who's one of the best technical divers that ever lived, Andrew Georgitsis, was supposed to lead the dive to actually investigate that at 400 feet. That's a very hard dive. They flew out there and Japan canceled it at the very last minute with no explanation. So that site, as far as I know, is yet to be fully explored. But this is all truth. Sea level has gone up. My biggest takeaway on this, Alan's a forensic accountant. I spent 20 plus years as a Wall Street investment advisor. We're both pretty good at math. And I think we'll both agree that insurance actuaries are probably about as good as arithmetic as anybody. Fair enough?
Yeah.
So you've got multi-billion-dollar developments at sea level up and down the eastern and western seaboard getting built every single day. They require insurance. And these insurance companies look out 50 years in their bottom line, and yet they're still underwriting these developments. So do you think they believe in catastrophic, climate change? No, they do not. They know it's a hoax. They don't say anything. But no insurance underwriter in the world would insure a property at sea level if their case was true. But it's not.
Well,
I know it.
I got a question for you. There's a person who used to be president of the United States. It's reported, I haven't checked the records, but I'll accept that this person owns two properties. One on Martha's Vineyard, that's an island, right? Okay. And one on Oahu. Oh, that's an island too. And both properties are on the shoreline. Well, if you're the president of the United States and you have access to the best information in the world about climate, why would you own two mansions on two different oceans on the shore?
No, you'd be building in Colorado.
The other thing that we can finish up with is that, and this is absolutely in your wheelhouse, Brady. There's a thing in archaeology, the science that studies old stuff, and it's called underwater archaeology. And where do the underwater archaeologists hang out? A lot of them hang out in the Mediterranean because they're diving on sites that are 80, 100 feet below sea level. And what fascinates me is they're diving on sites that are massive stone structures, statues, whatever. And I'm thinking one of two things. Either our ancient planetary ancestors had the unique ability and desire to build big stone structures underwater, or the sea levels have been rising for some time. What do you think?
I think that they just didn't tell us about the gas guzzling SUVs they had 2,000 years ago. That's the part we've missed. No, no, no.
See, or the coal-fired power plants.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Anything else in chat?
Well, Chris is here. Hey, Chris.
Yes, she is.
And Bill West is here. Lots of earthquakes in the Mediterranean area. That is true, Bill. But that doesn't quite explain what Alan just described, nor does it describe
Well,
underwater.
think about it. You have earthquakes and you have rising sea levels. Earthquakes can do two things. Three things. They can put big holes in the ground. They can make some land sink, and they can make some land go up. It's not just one.
Well, it's almost like tectonic plates shift and the world. Oh, gee. Isn't that how continents are formed?
And what do humans do that affect the movement of tectonic plates? Well, that'd be nothing, as far as I know. What else we got in chat?
Just the usual good stuff. Nothing that I really want to bring up. We got about 2 minutes. Let's wrap it up and say goodbye to everyone.
Okay. Well, go ahead, promote yourself.